History doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. 60 years ago, the streets of Birmingham, Selma, and Washington echoed with footsteps and voices demanding dignity, justice, and equality. Today, new voices rise from the digital trenches and crowded streets of Ferguson, Minneapolis, and beyond demanding many of the same things. We are told that progress has been made, and yes, it has. But when you dig deeper, when you trace the roots of oppression and resilience across generations, a chilling truth emerges. The struggle never ended, it only evolved. This is not just a documentary of facts, this is a journey through fire, through 3 real cases from the civil rights movement and their modern-day parallels. It's about protest and purpose, about resistance and resilience, about the human spirit rising against forces meant to break it. But more than that, this is about you. Because in the stories of those who stood up, sat down, marched forward, or knelt in silence, we find lessons not just in fighting injustice, but in finding ourselves. So buckle up. This isn't just a history lesson, it's a roadmap for power, purpose, and personal growth. December 1st, 1955, Montgomery, Alabama, a tired seamstress named Rosa Parks refuses to give up her seat to a white man. That small act of defiance shook the nation, but it wasn't just about the bus, it was about dignity, about saying, I am not less. And now fast forward 6 decades, it's 2016. Quarterback in the NFL, Colin Kaepernick, takes a knee during the national anthem. He doesn't shout. He doesn't throw punches. He simply lowers himself in quiet protest against police brutality and racial injustice. 2 different gestures, one sitting, one kneeling, but the message, strikingly similar. My body will not be used to endorse my oppression, and both were punished for it. Rosa Parks was arrested. Kaepernick was blackballed. This tells us something deep about how power reacts to even the most peaceful resistance. But here's the motivational spark. Neither Rosa nor Colin protested for applause. They did it with full awareness of the price, and that is what makes them powerful. When you stand or sit for what you believe in, you will be misunderstood, mocked, maybe even erased. But history isn't made by those who bend. It's made by those who dare to break the mold. Rosa Parks' refusal led to the Montgomery bus boycott, a 381-day movement that ignited the civil rights fire. Kaepernick's knee sparked global protest movements, athlete solidarity, and uncomfortable but necessary conversations. The lesson, one action fueled by conviction, is more powerful than 1,000 people who say nothing. What seat are you refusing to surrender today? What silence are you willing to break because your refusal to conform might be the first domino in a chain reaction that changes the world? There's a myth, dangerous and persistent, that real change only comes through violence. But if history has taught us anything, it's this: nonviolence is not weakness, it's strategy. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. didn't just preach peace because it sounded good. He understood that nonviolent disruption forces a society to look at itself in the mirror and answer the question it avoids. Who are we, really? Think about the lunch counter sit-ins. Black students dressed in suits, sitting silently as white customers dumped food on their heads and spat in their faces. They didn't strike back, and that's what made the image unforgettable. Fast forward to today. Peaceful protests shutting down highways, sit-ins in front of police stations, hashtags turning into movements. Nonviolent disruption today takes many forms: a viral tweet, a silent march, a boycott of companies profiting off injustice. You see, disruption doesn't have to be loud, it just has to stop the machine, and that's the power of strategy, not just emotion, but emotion with a blueprint. The civil rights movement succeeded not because people were angry, but because their anger was organized. Nonviolence was the sword, strategy was the handle. And in today's world, where injustice is coded into algorithms, disguised in corporate language, and hidden behind PR campaigns, the protester has to be smarter than ever. So if you're fighting for something, ask yourself, are you making noise, or are you making an impact? Because the most Effective protest doesn't just speak truth to power, it interrupts power until truth is no longer optional. In 1957, 9 African American teenagers walked into the all-white Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas. They weren't just students, they were warriors, guarded by federal troops, spit on by mobs, taunted in hallways, all for the simple right to learn. Fast forward to 2015, Spring Valley High School, South Carolina. A black student is yanked from her desk and violently slammed to the ground by a school resource officer. Her crime, not leaving the classroom fast enough. The room, silent, the students, frozen. History didn't just echo, it screamed. The struggle for equal education is not over, it's evolved from denial of entry to denial of safety. Today, schools in black and brown communities are underfunded, over-policed, and overcrowded. So what's the lesson in this painful parallel? That progress is not permanent, that rights must be defended, not just won. And that education, real, empowering, liberating education, is still one of the most radical tools of resistance, because a mind that knows its worth, its power, and its history is dangerous to systems of control. The Little Rock Nine showed us that bravery can be quiet. The students at Spring Valley showed us that silence in the face of injustice is not neutrality, it's surrender. If you're a student today, you're not just attending school. You're walking into a battlefield of ideas, a place where you either get taught how to fit in or how to fight back. Choose your role wisely, because the classroom has never just been about grades, it's always been about freedom. March 7th, 1965, Selma, Alabama. 600 marchers, mostly black, set out to walk 54 miles to Montgomery to demand their right to vote. They didn't carry weapons, they carried conviction, and on the Edmund Pettus Bridge they were met with batons, tear gas, and the brutal fists of white state troopers. The world watched and finally listened. Now fast forward. May 25th, 2020, George Floyd is murdered in Minneapolis, and the streets erupt, not just in one city or even one country, but globally. Black Lives Matter protests flood downtowns, capitals, and main streets. Millions march, and this time they have cameras, networks, and hashtags. Selma had shoes worn through by miles of walking. Floyd's marchers had social media and cell phone footage. But the heartbeat, the purpose, it was the same: to say, we have bled enough, we will be seen, we will be heard, and here's what they teach us. Protests are not about chaos. They are about correction. When systems fail to listen to suffering, the streets become the courtroom and the people become the verdict. Selma forced a president to push the Voting Rights Act. The George Floyd protests forced cities to reconsider policing, racial equity, and public accountability. You see, every step taken on those streets was a step toward justice, even when justice seemed too far. But here's the thing about walking toward justice: you have to keep walking. Because if Selma was the beginning and Floyd was the alarm, then this generation must be the movement that doesn't stop at awareness but fights for transformation. The bridge is still there, so is the burden, and now it's your turn to march. In 1963, the world saw dogs unleashed on black children in Birmingham. Not because they stumbled upon it, but because cameras were finally rolling. Civil rights leaders knew something powerful. Injustice hides in silence, but it burns in the spotlight. They didn't just march. They made sure the world watched them march. Television became their amplifier. Grainy black and white footage became their truth teller, and those images of beatings, bloodied heads, and brutal arrests stirred a nation's conscience. Now fast forward. It's not just TV cameras anymore, it's smartphone. Live streams, viral tweets, one knee on George Floyd's neck, one phone recording it all, and suddenly the world wasn't just watching, it was awakening. Today's media is faster, louder, and more personal, but it comes with a cost: noise without direction, outrage without action. Because here's the danger: when every tragedy becomes content, we start to forget that behind every hashtag is a human being. Media can be a weapon, but only when we know how to use it. So ask yourself, are you consuming the movement or contributing to it? The civil rights leaders of the past didn't wait to go viral. They made history without trending. Your phone is your platform. Your voice is your broadcast. Don't just scroll through pain, speak through it. Don't just share the story, become the story. Because in every era there are two kinds of people, those who watch the revolution and those who document it, drive it, and define it. When we think of leadership, we often imagine a person on a stage. But black leadership in the civil rights movement wasn't about ego, it was about sacrifice. Martin Luther King Jr. knew that a speech could change minds. Malcolm X knew that a truth, unapologetically spoken, could shake system. But here's what history often hides: leadership is lonely, leadership is dangerous. These men didn't just carry dreams, they carried targets. Behind every march was strategy, behind every protest was preparation. Behind every microphone was a mission. Today, leadership wears a different outfit. It might come in the form of a young organizer rallying their community, a woman filming injustice from her phone, a student challenging a racist policy at their school. Leadership today isn't always behind a podium. Sometimes it's behind a tweet, a classroom desk, or a courtroom bench. But just like before, it still demands courage, consistency, a commitment to something bigger than yourself. In a world hungry for influence, true leaders fight for impact. They don't seek applause, they seek accountability, and they don't always win the popularity contest, but they change lives. Malcolm X once said, if you're not ready to die for it, put the word freedom out of your vocabulary. That's the kind of fire we need, not for martyrdom, but for momentum, because black leadership has always been about lifting as you climb, rising with resilience, and pulling your people up with you. So ask yourself today, are you waiting for a leader, or are you becoming one? In 1960, 4 black college students sat down at a whites only lunch counter in Greensboro, North Carolina. They didn't shout, they didn't throw punches, they just sat with purpose, and with that simple act they ignited a movement. Why? Because the youth weren't waiting for permission. They were the movement. In Selma, in Birmingham, on buses and in courtrooms, teenagers and 20, some things led the charge. They risked arrests, beatings, and even death. And not because they were fearless, but because they believed the future deserved to look different than the past. Now fast forward to today, we see it again. High schoolers walking out in protest of gun violence, young creators using social media to expose injustice, Gen Z standing up, speaking out, refusing to be silenced. But here's the truth: youth activism doesn't start when you grow up. It starts the moment you give it. Damn, the system counts on young people to be distracted, entertained, silenced by student loans, minimum wages, and Instagram filters. But every time a young person speaks with clarity, every time a student challenges a status quo, the system shakes. You don't need degrees to demand dignity. You don't need a following to fuel a fight. You need conviction, that same conviction that burned in the hearts of freedom riders, that same fire that drove John Lewis across the Edmund Pettus Bridge at 25 years old. The same fire lives in you, so don't underestimate your power. You are not the future, you are the force. Every march leaves footprints, every voice echoes into the future. The civil rights movement wasn't just a chapter in a history book, it was a blueprint, a strategy, a soul, deep reminder that justice isn't a moment, it's a movement. But movements can't survive without memory, and today we don't just honor the past, we inherit it. Martin's dream wasn't meant to be archived. Malcolm's fire wasn't meant to fade. They passed the baton not to politicians, but to us. The legacy they left is living. It's in the way we walk into rooms with pride. It's in the way we teach our children truth. It's in the way we refuse to water down our worth. But a legacy is only powerful if we protect it, and here's where the lessons hit hardest. Organize before you protest. Educate before you escalate. Build before you burn. The civil rights movement taught us that anger without direction is A fire without fuel, but strategy, that's how systems fall. So when we chant today, when we march, post, write, speak, vote, build, we are continuing what they began. We're not just their descendants. We are the answer to their prayers, and the challenge now, to not just be inspired, but be responsible, responsible enough to learn, brave enough to lead, and wise enough to know. The struggle isn't over, but neither is our power. This isn't just history. This is your inheritance. The civil rights movement handed us more than memories. It handed us the mission. And today, that mission continues, not just on the streets, but in classrooms, boardrooms, ballot boxes, bedrooms where dreams are whispered and plans are born. You want to change the world? Start by changing your habits. Start by learning the names they forgot to teach. Start by challenging the conversations they said were too uncomfortable, because comfort is the enemy of progress. Real revolutions are built on discomfort, on the courage to say enough. And to follow that with action, register to vote, start a podcast, mentor someone, call out injustice in the meeting room and the living room. Use your voice, your story, your platform, no matter how small, because silence never changed a single thing. And if you feel too broken to lead, remember this: so were they. Malcolm was broken by prison, Martin was broken by threats, Rosa was tired, Fanny was silenced, but they chose to stand anyway, and that choice, that is what shook the system. So ask yourself, if they could rise, what's stopping you? Don't wait for perfect, don't wait for permission, because the revolution isn't coming. The civil rights movement was not just a moment in time. It was a masterclass in resilience, vision, and purposeful action through the lives of leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and the brave activists who stood alongside them. We learn that true change is born not from comfort but from conviction. Today's social justice movements carry that same fire, but with new tools and new battles. The power to continue their legacy lies within us, not just to remember their courage, but to reflect it in our everyday choices. This is your call to rise, not later but now, because the revolution didn't end, it simply changed hands.